Tzeentch, the changer of the ways, is the chaos god of magic, evolution, manipulation, and trickery. He is Flux incarnate, the god who truly embodies the endless, broiling change that is chaos. It is Tzeentch above all who holds the terrible knowledge of fate and destiny in his talons. His worshippers are desperate to share in such lore, but are merely pawns in the great game. Another piece to move on the board and outplay the other chaos gods. To serve Tzeentch is to invite insanity. His servants weave their own complex webs of influence and manipulation, founding cults in high society as well as armed legions of puppet followers. They pay no mind to the fact that their master views such plots as mere petty distractions, for the architect of fate's own design is aeons in the making. My Govanen Melonin, and well met indeed. I am Arakir Galadirthan, and welcome to Warhammer 3. Tzeentch has seen your coming. Welcome to another faction overview, today dealing with the first of the Chaos Realms, and this is Tzeentch. Something about Tzeentch pulled me in. I don't know what it is, maybe because his followers seem to be aviary in their design, or perhaps because I just can't stand Nurgle, and Tzeentch and Nurgle seem to not like one another. But, as before, we shan't do this any further, we shall dive right in. So what unique features can you expect playing as the Lords of Change? Well, as with all Chaos Realms, the first thing, which I think is actually very interesting, and many people will probably despise greatly, is you cannot strike up diplomatic relations with anybody who is not also a Chaos faction. And the game will tell you that you must go to war with all nations, but no. It is a stage further. Not only must you go to war with anyone that is not a Chaos faction, you also have no diplomatic options with them at all. You cannot negotiate with this faction. So that's your first point. You're not going to have very many allies, because you also don't even like some of your own Chaos factions, because such is the nature of such a disgraceful feature like Chaos. They hate each other as much as they hate everyone else, and you have to join in with that. The primary feature, though, of the Tzeentch campaign, their secondary currency, which seems to be the theme of Warhammer 3, is grimoires, or more plural, to be accurate more grammatically, are grimoires. Grimoires is a secondary currency. You obtain these books by completing battles, founding cults in other people's cities and reaping the rewards, and some buildings also give a slow trickle of grimoires. And then the grimoires themselves are needed for a number of things, chiefly your research. In the research, you will note there are a number of different items that require a set number of grimoires, so you get them for that. You also need them for Tzeentch's next main feature, the Changing of the Ways, which is the one that looks like a book over on the side there. Changing of the Ways is, in essence, forced diplomacy, the game. You get the option to tell other people what you're going to do with their lands, and I rather like that. At the start of the game, as you can see, turn 1, this is turn 1, you've only got the transfer settlement option, but note, you can transfer things to yourself. You need a number of grimoires, as you can see, 750 to transfer this backwater hole over to ourselves. Absolutely disgraceful. But you can indeed transfer things around and about, and even to yourself. Now note, I can't transfer this particular one to myself, but you have a play around with it and you will find there are some that you can transfer to yourself, like this one over here. 592 grimoires are required. I believe you simply can't transfer a settlement that you border. I think it has to come from somewhere else, but there might be some other feature at play. I don't know. But you can transfer the settlement to other nations. So you're forcing people to make decisions that they might not want to make. And as your research deepens and grows, your technologies unlock down the left and the right-hand side of the technology tree. We'll come back to that. You then unlock more of these. So revealing shroud, forcing rebellions, tracking armies, halting factions. You really are the bringer and lord of change. You force change in others where they may not want it. That is your blessing. Also, as a Chaos faction, this one's not specifically unique to Tzeentch, but it will have unique features for Tzeentch, but it is unique to the Chaos Realms themselves, and that is the Great Game, also known as Unholy Manifestations. So Unholy Manifestations, the furthest one on the right-hand side down here, are basically invocations again. The starting one for Tzeentch, though, quite cheekily, gives you 250 grimoires, but you can't be within your own region to do it. And it, as you can see from that, it disables campaign movement for the army you choose to do it on. So that's how these work. You select an army that belongs to you. Although, as I say, we have to be somewhere else, so let's just move him over there. You click on your Unholy Manifestation, and then it will do that little that circle emanating out from likely targets. I can click on Tzeentch, and I can tell him to do the Scriveners of Insanity. And then in 2 turns, he'll give us 250 grimoires. That's not Tzeentch, sorry, that's Kairos. God, it even says his name above him. Anywho, but it locks him down for 2 turns. And it can be done to other armies. And then, as you can see, as your corruption grows, you get more of these. Corruption is exactly what it says on the tin. It is your corruption the world over. So you need to spread your corruption out and about. Spread it into other nations by having armies in regions, or by osmosis, by bordering a region. Your corruption, not culture, sorry, will slowly creep into that region and grow. And once your corruption within those regions grows high enough, you unlock more unholy manifestations. Now, do note, this is all part, as I say, of the Great Game feature, which, once your corruption reaches the peak, you can claim to ascend. And it gives you a set number of boosts for a specific number of turns. And chief amongst those boosts is it makes your unholy manifestations better when you are ascended. But to ascend, you need to spread your corruption out into the world. But as I say, that's the same for all the Chaos Nations. Spreading corruption is their want. Lastly, unique to this faction is the Winds of Change manipulation, which in many ways really is just the Winds of Change reorganization or redistribution. Once you hold more than one province, you have the option of decreasing its strength in a certain province to increase it within another. So you can tailor and make sure that your defenses are doing what they should be doing when you need them to do what they need to do. Lastly, you can use a teleportation stance. And you're all going to say, but Galu, hold on a moment. That is but the underways, is it not? And to you, I would say, no, it isn't. Because the one key difference between teleporting and using the underways is you cannot be intercepted. So you can jump your army around the world and no one can stop you doing that. But you do have to unlock it, interestingly. So you have to unlock teleportation there after the Way of Deception and up that straight line, and you'll need the grimoires to do it. So that's Tzeentch in a nutshell. You can manipulate the winds of magic, you gather grimoires from battles and cultists and buildings, and you use those grimoires to tell others that actually, sorry, I know you've just captured that province, but I'm terribly sorry to have to let you know that I'm going to give it to someone else, and there's nothing you can do about it. And lastly, you've got the unholy manifestations, which are the Chaos world over, but the ones that you get are, of course, unique to you. Let's just have a brief look then at the commandments for the Lord of Change and see what you can do when you unite all of your provinces. Listen! Hear me and obey. Commandments! That's what they mean. But what do they do? There are 4 options playing as Tzeentch once you've united a province that you can do. The first is Igrim's Contrivance Algorithm, which is a load of fluff to say that the chance of Nurgle spreading his vile plague is down by 40%, your research rate boosts by 10%, and the chance of Winds of Magic changing in strength is boosted by 25%. So you're very unlikely to have negative Winds of Magic if you're defending yourself or fighting in your own province that has Igrim's Contrivance Algorithm. Alternatively, to go for a more let's keep this place under control, you can go with the Architect's Theorem, which gives you +4 control and boosts the movement range of all of your forces. Lastly, Mutalith Prism Formulae, or second to lastly, penultimately you might say, Grimoires from all your buildings is up 50%. Not that many buildings actually give you Grimoires, but you haven't seen the building side yet, even though I'm recording this after I've done the building bit, but when we get there, one of the buildings gives you +8 grimoires, so with this, you'd get +12. Yay, cried the people. And lastly, foster cults. spread Tzeentch corruption. So Tzeentch corruption in your combined collective province is up by 3, and the osmosis effect of your corruption spreads to the adjacent provinces with a strength of +1. So the commandments, I like commandments that give me control, really, but the control one, alas, only gives +4 control, and then 20% campaign movement range for enemy armies. Sorry, I've said it's boosted yours. I've lied. It's before us all, and I've read it wrong. It's -20% for enemies, so they move slower in your realm. Those are your commandments. Do as I say. With commandments done and dusted, we move then on to what buildings can you expect to build as this absolute demonic monstrosity, Kairos Fateweaver and the Lords of Change? Well, not very many. Something that I find, if we just drop out a moment and speak plainly, Warhammer 3, for the Chaos Realms, you don't get much, is how I would describe them. They have fantastic features that play totally differently to any other Total War game. But your army roster is very small and your buildings aren't very numerous. So in basic military, you've got the Slither of Potential line, which gives you your basics. Blue Horrors of Tzeentch. And if you could move out of the way, Blue Horrors, that'd be cracking. Chaos Furies. Second tier gives you the Pink Horrors of Tzeentch. And then at the top there, you get your Exalted Pink Horrors of Tzeentch. And you get one of your heroes, the Iridescent Horror. One is of metal, and one is of Tzeentch himself. Second military tab is the Many-Eyed Tribute line, which gives you Forsaken of Tzeentch, standard mainline warriors, Spawn of Tzeentch, Chaos Knights of Tzeentch, and Doom Knights of Tzeentch. And if you aren't going to be absolutely trying to throttle me through the screen with the number of times I say the word Tzeentch in this episode, then there's something wrong with you. In the Advanced Military tab, you get the Spark, which just simply unlocks the Screamers of Tzeentch. No other further benefits. Similar with the building lines of the other military, there are no other benefits. Unfortunately, they just unlock units, so nothing secondary, which is a bit disappointing. Anyway, you get the Screamers of Tzeentch, and then the Flamers, Exalted Flamer, and finally the Burning Chariot. So you can tell where all of the units come from. It's very easy if you get a province to be able to train your full roster as the Lord of Change. In the Cult of Deceits, you get your other hero unit, the Cultist of Tzeentch. The Cultist in many ways seems like a worse version of an Iridescent Horror, but I'm sure those who are far more knowledgeable on the subject of Warhammer 3 than I will tell you why one is better than the other. But the purposes of this is to give you a brief overview of the entire faction, not to deep dive into why an Iridescent Horror will absolutely poop all over a cultist, or vice versa. That is potentially for another day. But it unlocks the hero recruitment, as I mentioned, and now the first building that does something else. It gives you Tzeentch Corruption. Second tier, the corruption gets higher, you can get another hero, you get your capacity upgraded, and the Cult of Change is required to unlock certain technologies, so you will need that to go for your full technology tree. And lastly, in military, the Transmogrification Locus. Gene sample accepted and cloned. Transmogrification in process. That's a very obscure reference. Recruit rank is up, local recruitment is up, and then again, same features. Till the very top, you get your Soul Grinder at the Inchoate Forge. Inchoate? No, I imagine that's Inchoate. I'm going to go with that. Anywho, so those are the military buildings. Defense-wise, you've got your demonic lurkers, improved tower projectiles, which is pretty nice, provides a garrison chiefly, so you can bolster your garrison. Enemy hero chances are down as well, so that's giving you all-round defense. Enemy hero action chances debuffed, you get a bigger garrison, and your towers and things do more damage. Your troops, as you'll see there as well, have more leadership when under siege, and the benefits just rise as that building goes up. Then you, like everyone else, gets your standard anti-Skaven building, because the Skaven is so omnipresent that even Chaos apparently fear Undercities, which is a bit madness. It's all madness. And lastly, infrastructure. We've got a convolution, giving you control, which is always helpful if you're playing on the harder difficulties, because control is the only way they know how to make the game hard, apparently. Defensive supplies for when you are under siege. Those are the features. That's the currency you use to build defenses in the siege battle maps. And if you've seen nothing about Warhammer, which I highly doubt, then yes, I said that correctly. When you are under siege in Warhammer 3 and then you fight the battle, the enemy attacks you, you can build defenses within the city to hold them back, turning choke points into even more choky choke points. So the convolution is giving defense line, and so control and defenses. So another defensive orientated building. Campaign line of sight, you can see, is up there at 50% as well. And then with the web of secrets, this is pure income and growth. A lovely little mix. It's always nice when your income and growth are tied together, because then you don't have to choose between them. And again, it just gets stronger as it goes up. You'll note there that the winds of magic directly affect a number of our buildings. So you are going to want to manipulate the winds of change and the winds of magic, by being the Lord of Change, to make sure that your buildings are getting the most out of them. Or stop, rewind that. To make sure you're getting the most out of your buildings. Penultimately, the thaumaturgic load gives even better growth and better barrier replenishment rate for your armies. We will talk about the barrier system in the second half because it's pertinent to troops, not to the campaign map. And then again, this just gets stronger as it goes up. Growth gets higher, and the barrier replenishment at 35 is lovely. And lastly, the hidden library is your grimoire building, slowly giving you 1, 2, 3, 4 per turn. Research rate is up at 5%, and income from all buildings is boosted, which is lovely. And the Lost Athenaeum at the end there, 8 grimoires, always very nice to see. The region we are currently in has the Court of the Covenant, which is always going to be your capital, because at the moment Kairos Fateweaver is the only legendary lord for Tzeentch. You will be playing in this location if you're playing as Tzeentch, so you will be building the Court of the Covenant. Allegiance points, which is very nice. Do note, allegiance points is again another system that's pervasive through the whole of Warhammer 3, and this is now the system that is used to assign military targets with your allies or transfer settlements with them. When you actually have an ally, this is the currency that is used to do joint actions with that ally. It means that you can't abuse the transfer settlement feature, basically. You can't just keep paying for all of their regions until they've got one region and but they've got all your money. The allegiance point system keeps that in check. So this building is useful if you are seeking to have allies. If you're just going to burn the world, then don't worry about it, because the +3 control isn't worth it for 10,000. I can't remember what our gold is called. It's not called gold, is it? Favor. 10,000 favor. It's not worth it if you're only in it for the control. You will note uniquely that the province capital of Tzeentch can be one or t'other. You can either go with a soul keep, or you can go with a dimensional tear. Now, both of them have the defensive benefits that you can see there, that they add walls to the settlement when you're outside of Ogre or Norscan homelands, and they provide a number of different units of garrison. And at each tier, you can convert to one or the other. And the primary difference really being that the dimensional breach will spread Tzeentch corruption, as you can see there. Tzeentch corruption +6, Tzeentch corruption in adjacent provinces +3, whereas the Dark Bastion and its ilk doesn't do that. They don't have the corruption aspect. But they pay for that in other ways. The growth is higher, as you saw there. The growth on that building is 20. The income's 150, whereas the growth on that is 10. The income is 150, actually. That's a shame. It seems, in many ways, just having a quick glance down those, that because corruption is so useful for Tzeentch, I'm not sure you'd be many times where you choose the Dark Bastion. Personally, I've had a look at these already before I did the overview, and yeah, I just personally, at the moment, I would feel the Dimensional Breach is better. But do note the Bastion does make construction cheaper, and you can swap at any time. It costs you favour, but you can do that. So if you know that this place is relatively safe, it's deep within your heartland, you're not worried about Tzeentch corruption, then chuck in a Bastion and build this place up. But then if the corruption needs to be pulsated out through the vines and tendrils in the ground, then build the Dimensional Breach again and replace the Bastion. Right, so those are your buildings. We've had a brief look at the research tree, but let's just have a look at it again. Again, not absolutely huge, and hugely gated behind grimoires. You need grimoires for a great many things, and you have this right and left-hand side interesting feature. I'm not going to go through all of the research. This is just a brief overview of it and how it is affected. And in that, as I say, there aren't a whole heap of research options available to you. Many of them are time-barred, soft locked is a better word, behind needing a number of grimoires. And chiefly note that you need 100 before you can teleport anywhere, so that's likely to be one that you'll go for quite near to the beginning. But it requires 4 other technologies before you can even do it, which is crazy. So you won't be teleporting anytime soon. Lastly, before then we jump over to the battle map and look at the disappointingly small Tzeentch roster, it is just a moment to touch upon your lords. The Herald of Tzeentch, oh Isis, and Orak the Altriide. What a name. What a name. You can have your lords of metal or Tzeentch. That is the particular type of flavour you can have your lords in. And both of them, like with everything in the Tzeentch roster, are casters. Tzeentch is very much magic, because Tzeentch quite literally is the creator of magic, the source of all magic in the world. So all of your followers follow suit, and your lords are magic-wielding warriors. Isis, we shall choose you to give you a little overview. They all have wonderful voice lines, I will give you that, even if they do look just so stupid. Having a quick look over the skills then, note that last time I mentioned how all of these are the same for everyone, but there are some variations here and there, particularly for Chaos, whereas you'll note we're spreading our corruption out into the world. But otherwise you've got the same line where you're just boosting your army. And then, as mentioned, casters. Casters. The Herald of Tzeentch casts onto the battlefield with a number of quite good damaging spells, and there are always, of course, alternative spells to just pure damage, but they are casters primarily, not really warriors. Try and keep them away from the warriors of the enemy, because they will kill them, because not only are they casters in terms of spells, but they're casters in terms of range. They are primarily a ranged unit. So do watch out for that when you're fighting with them. We'll have a look in the heroes in the second half of this video, but before we jump over to the battle map, there is just time to look over Kairos Fateweaver. Kairos Fateweaver, also known as the Oracle of Tzeentch, is the wisest of the Lords of Change. Cast into the well of eternity by Tzeentch, he emerged with two heads. The left head scries the past, whilst the right can perceive what is yet to be. And so it is that Fateweaver has gained infallible knowledge of both the past and the future, but is blind to what occurs in the present. He is your legendary lord. The unique features of playing as a Kairos Fateweaver are that your ambush defense chance is up by 50%. That's a bit underwhelming, isn't it? And your enemy hero action success chance is down by 50%. So that's the benefit of playing as Kairos, although you don't get a choice, as I've already mentioned. Kairos is the only way. Kairos is all. But those are the unique features of Kairos himself that I just mentioned. So those are the benefit of having him lead those armies. The actual benefits to you nationwide as playing as Kairos are to do with reinforcement and prediction time. So if you haven't seen, battles in Warhammer 3 have been changed ever so slightly in that reinforcements do not come into the battle straight away. So if you have two armies fighting two armies, two of those will be the primary armies meeting each other, and then your reinforcements will come in after a certain amount of time, and the enemy's reinforcements will do the same. And the predictions in relation to that now require certain researchers to improve. You'll only get a rough idea of when those reinforcements are coming. But playing as the Fateweaver, your enemy reinforcement time prediction accuracy is improved 100%, which means it's twice as good. Your battle reinforcement time is down by 50%, so your reinforcements will come in quicker. And then lastly, all of your heroes have a 15% higher chance of being successful at whatever they set their hand to, whether it's baking bread, writing letters, painting the wall, or murdering in the name of the Lord of Change. Their chance is up by 15%. That is the benefit that Kairos brings. Where does Kairos start, I hear you cry? Well, you've been there the whole time. We're on the Eastern Steppes, which is a very nice, snug location. Absolutely stellar views out of the pit of chaos into the hell and the abyss below, but with very little risk of being attacked unless anyone else has any teleportation or undermining abilities, because we start in the Volary, never seen that word before in my life. We start in the Volary, and you need to unite the entirety of the Eastern Steppes, which, as you will have seen from various pre-release information, borders the Great Wall of Cathay, the Great Bastion as it's called, and the Snake Gate is your primary entry point into the realm of Cathay, who will be your most likely your main enemy for pretty much the entirety of the game. So you need to unite the Eastern Steppes, and your starting rebels are Cathayan. Is it Cathayan? What's the demonym of someone from Cathay? You tell me. But you've got Xu Zhang there. Xu Zhang. Although when I played, I did a little playtest as Kairos, Xu Zhang ran away immediately. So if you don't fight him, he just buggers off anyway. But the forces of Cathay do hold the Fortress of Eyes at the end there, so you will possibly fight them. But again, they died before I even got there in my little playtest of it. So each to their own. You also have people to the south that you don't like. Karneth's sons. Corn. Yes. The haters of everything in the known world that is not dying or dead. Corn. Starts away to your south. So not generic chaos, but it is generic chaos up in the rest of the Eastern Steppe. So those are the rebel nations you're likely to fight. And in terms of major neighbours, as already discussed and already pointed out there, your biggest neighbour is, of course, Cathay, who are away up here. But unlike Kislev, very interestingly, you do start with an ally here in the Terracotta Graveyard. Tzeentch. Tzeentch begins firmly allied to you. You are firm friends, because he is also a follower of Tzeentch. So that's a nice little unique feature. But yes, your primary enemy will be Cathay on and beyond the Bastion in the realm of Cathay over there. Or Grand Cathay, sorry. Pronounce it how you will. Do what you want to do. So that's Tzeentch. That is where he starts. That is what his campaign plays like. And now, as I've already mentioned, let's just turn over to the battle map and have a look at the absolutely tiny roster. And I say that with meaning and with verve, because the roster compared to Kislev is unbelievably small. Disappointingly so. But you judge for yourselves. See you there. You! Yes, you! Sitting there, watching this. Do you like single entity units? Yes? And do you have an absolutely overwhelming love for the colours of pink and purple? Yes? And have I got the roster for you? Buckle in, because Tzeentch stands before you. Tzeentch's army is incredibly difficult to line up into these all sorts of tiers and the like, and in many ways they've kind of completely gone out of the window. We're only on the second episode. But it's always nice to at least try. There are some units that are guaranteed trash, looking at these down here, but then as the lines go up, it's almost impossible to order these all into a certain tier structure. But note, Tzeentch has a very heavy ranged focus. Once again, a lot of actual dedicated ranged units, and this time, unlike the last episode, we will actually talk about the siege equipment, but even some of the non-ranged units, i.e. the melee units, also have a range component. But the army is so small that it doesn't really show that there are all that many ranged units. But actually, when you look at the orange bars all dotted out there before you, you can see that there are a number of ranged units. But let's start at the beginning, as we mean to go on with the infantry first. Blue Horrors of Tzeentch. There they are. They don't make as cool a noise as the pink ones. He says they probably make the same noise. Anyway, blue horrors. Before we dive into the horrors, let's talk about the barrier. The barrier is the light blue, teal, cyan, call it what you will, colour above the banner of all of the units you see before you. And it's listed at the top on the side there. And the barrier works like a shield in basically any sci-fi game ever. So it absorbs damage until it is depleted. And then when that unit's no longer in combat, the barrier will begin to slowly heal back up again. But it will never be greater than the total health of the unit. So it benefits cycle charging units greatly. It benefits cavalry a lot. You charge them in, they do all their damage. The enemy tries to fight back, only dealing damage to the barrier, and they bugger off before they take any health damage. That is its benefit. And you saw from the building section earlier, was it the building or the commandments? I can't remember. In any event, earlier you saw that there was a feature that boosted the barrier, and that's what barrier is. And as you can see, absolutely everything in your roster benefits from the barrier. So started with the barrier. The blue horrors are a javelin. I mean, they don't throw javelins, but that's how my brain associates them. They're a javelin unit because they can throw something before they get into battle. But look at those abysmal stats. Their armor is 5. Why even bother? Take it off. You'll probably run a bit faster. Whatever it is about you that makes you have an armor stat of 5, it isn't worth it, guys. Just drop it. Maybe it's the little bones sticking out of their arm. Who knows? But the crazy little buggers have very little armor. Their leadership is woeful. When I was talking about Kislev not being very good, theirs is at least in the 65-70 range, but this is 45. If an enemy glowers at them, they'll probably turn around and run away. So watch out for that. They're not going to stay for very long. Their speed is 38, which is also nothing that you would write home to and say, Mum, the speed of my unit is fantastic. Not in this instance. It would be more akin to, Mum, my blue horrors died because everything is quicker than them. That's more likely. Melee attack is 20, but they do get flaming attacks. This unit inflicts flaming attacks. Units hit by flaming attacks heal at half the usual rate, whilst on fire and sustain additional damage if vulnerable to fire. So they're very good against undead, which is, I am almost certain, will not like flaming attacks. They also have magical attacks, which means that they can harm units that are protected from regular physical attacks, like ghosts. So they're good anti-ghosts. Well, they're not good. They're absolutely useless. But as a nice little side note, they do damage ghosts, and they damage anything that doesn't like fire. Their melee defense is 22, which is not very good. Their weapon strength is 24, which, say it with me now, is not very good. Charge bonus is only 10, which is absolutely abysmal. This unit has a single purpose: to throw things at the enemy before the battle is really joined, try and deplete their numbers, and then, sadly, to die. For that is all that awaits them on the other side. This unit is demonic, has physical resistance, does not rout, is immune to terror, takes damage when leadership is low. So they won't run away, but they'll die instead. Their connection to the physical realm or our mortal plane will deplete, and they will slowly dissipate into nothing until they are quite literally nothing. But they do cause fear, so humans won't like them very much. They have a physical resistance of 20%, and they can hide in the forests. Probably won't mention the forest while moving forward. So, those are your blue horrors. Your red horrors aren't red, they're pink. Your pink horrors throw things a little bit further. These ones have been in the gym, they didn't skip arm day. So they can throw things a little further. But what they throw is a ball of sort of magic, really. So I'm surprised their missile strength isn't magical. Oh, it is. They put it on the ammunition and not on the missile strength. I would have thought it would go on the missile strength. How have I missed that? Been playing Warhammer for years. Anyway, the blue horrors only have 5 ammunition, you'll note there. Again, cementing them as a javelin-style unit. Whereas your pink horrors have a solid ammunition of 20. 130 range, so we're really dealing with real range now, and 28 missile damage. Compared with your blue horrors, though, the pink ones have more health, more armor, more leadership, more melee attack. They have more of everything that is listed there. They are actually all round better than your blue horrors. Where possible, avoid the blue horrors. The only real benefit the blue horrors are bringing to the table is that they're cheaper, and alas, that's about all they've got going for them. So, sorry, I'm hovering over the wrong one. I've hovered over the wrong one. This whole video's gone to Kaputski. We're only 30 seconds into the bloody unit. No, we're not. We're 6 minutes in. Anyway, sorry. Ignore that. Ignore everything I just said. Rewind. Feel free to write your reviews down below. This guy is useless. Right, comparing the blue horrors to the pink horrors, which we shall do this time. The pink horrors have considerably more health, so I was correct in that part. But other than that, the blue horrors are actually better. Alas, these evil days should be mine. No. I was right the first time. So at the moment, we have the blue horrors selected, which is what you're seeing over here. When we hover over the pink horrors, which is now showing, you'll note that they are just better in almost all regards, save having a little bit less health than the blue horrors. So that is the true story. The blue horrors are a touch tankier because they actually fight in melee, whereas the pink horrors don't have as much health, but then again, I was right as I said earlier, they are better across the board. Their range is 130, missile strength 28, they do the flaming damage, they do magical damage, they are just better all round. Do get pink horrors, not blue horrors, they're going to do more for you. Now, there's a second type of pink horror, it's an exalted version. The exalted version has more health than a standard horror. They have better armor, better leadership, better everything. But will cost a little bit more for the pleasure. They have the same number of men in the... men? They're not men. They're blobs of goo and gouging things. Disgusting little verminous creatures. The blue horrors do have more. Again, creating that role of something on the field. To die in the name of Tzeentch. They are there to die. That really is their only purpose. These ones are going to do the actual damage and upgrade to Exalted where you can. The Exalted have the additional bonus of Arcane Mirth. When not fighting, Squealers can be put to good use, conjuring up fresh batch of magical mischief to lay the enemy low. They boost the power recharge rate when they are out of melee of your casters. So keep them out of melee. Those are the first tier units, the ones you're going to get a lot in the campaign. You're going to be playing with them a lot. Now, the first units to support them being sort of in the cavalry line. I've put flyers in the cavalry line. Sue me if you disagree. I can give you the details. Anywho, the Chaos Furies are first. Chaos Furies are winged bat-like creatures with arms and legs that really don't want to stand still, but I don't want to pause it. And they like to bounce up and down. Chaos Furies, 20 armor, not really that great again. Poor leadership again, but their speed is 110. That's fantastic. So they're going to fly around, hit people in the back. 36 melee attack. If we compare that with our blue horrors, alas, the blue horrors melee attack is 20, 16 less. So much better melee attack. There are only 30 of these though, so less than so a quarter of the number. But considerably better than the blue horrors in that regard. Their weapon strength is 20 more, and their charge bonus is actually, interestingly, not that great at only 24. You would have thought it'd be a little better given that they are flyers. This unit can fly. Interesting that they feel the need to tell you that when the unit is quite literally flying. But anywho, supporting your Chaos Furies, your early tier, pretty trash is something I should have mentioned that I've aired in that regard. But they are Vanguard deployments, so at least they can start out here. But otherwise, early tier trash. We're still in the early tier trash. Supporting them, though, become the Screamers. Looking very interesting indeed. Slowly and gently hovering up and down. Screamers have, unfortunately, less health than the Furies. There are way less of them as well, which doesn't bode all that well, does it? But they have slightly less health. They have considerably better leadership. You're getting your first unit that's now on par with Kislev's lowest leadership, which is interesting. Their speed is worse, their melee attack is worse, but their defense is better and their weapon strength is better. Now remember, melee attack means how likely am I going to hit that enemy, and melee defense means how likely am I going to dodge an attack. Weapon strength is how much damage am I actually going to do. The Screamers have armor-piercing damage, which is very nice, and they are anti-large, so they will do more damage against cavalry and the like, monsters primarily. So they're sort of an anti-large, they're an anti-cavalry unit, if you will, and again, they can fly. And again, there's demonic instability that we saw before with the leadership, so they have a similar feature to the undead. As their leadership drops, they begin to die rather than run away. They will fight, quite literally, to the death, and they cause fear in units around them, so humans won't like them very much either. Next up, we come to some actual mainline dependable units in the Forsaken of Tzeentch. The Forsaken of Tzeentch are your flavour of Chaos Warrior. And they just look absolutely ridiculous. Is anyone really looking at that and thinking, oh yeah, I'd love to have lines and lines and lines of them. I can really get behind that clawed, bizarre excuse for a humanoid. Anyway, my hatred of Chaos aside, comparing to the blue horrors, the only other real melee unit we've got in the roster, the Forsaken are way, way better, except because of their lower numbers, they have less health. But their leadership is much better. Leadership, let's do it the other way around. It's much better doing it the other way around. Their leadership is up by 25 over the blue horrors at 70. Their armor is 85. That's just an actual armor stat, which is nice. Their speed is better than the blue horrors. Melee attack's much better. Now, interestingly, their melee defense is worse because they aren't small little blue people who happen to have 4 arms. And generally speaking, when you're being attacked by a man with a sword, having 4 arms, being of roughly about 3 foot in height, and having a giant tongue and being quite mobile allows you to avoid those attacks. So the melee defense of the blues is better, but the weapon strength and the charge bonus of the Forsaken infinitely better. The Forsaken and the blue horrors come at about the same sort of time in your availability in your roster as well. So they are just a much better version. But then again, 120 of these boys throwing 21 damage missiles or throwing stones at the enemy, as we've seen with the hobbits if you've ever played Divide and Conquer. Don't discount the little boys just because their damage doesn't seem that high. 120 of them throwing 5 21 damage stones at an enemy is going to do something. So they have a place. The Forsaken are armoured. as we've already seen. If they get their armor high enough, they then chuck in an armor to make you think you've got a unit that's doing something. But their primary feature is frenzy. If their leadership is higher, is in the top 50%, yeah, 50 to 100%, then their base weapon damage is improved, armor piercing weapon damage is improved, charge bonus is up, melee attack is up, and they're immune to psychology. But it just means that there is a huge debuff to them when they drop below. When their leadership drops below 50%, they will become much, much worse. So you do have to watch out for that. Keep them protected. Keep them going. Supporting them are the Spawn of Tzeentch. Spawn of Tzeentch are just Chaos Spawn. From my time with the Beastmen, Chaos Spawn always underperformed. A pretty naff unit. But there are only 12 of them. They're more of a monster, hence why they're called Monstrous Infantry. But of course they are still infantry, so that's why they're in this middle category. Comparing them with the Forsaken, again, let's do it the other way round. Spawn of Tzeentch have much more health, but there are less of them. They have no armor to speak of at all, so armor-piercing units will have a field day with these boys. Their leadership is up by 30 in really, really good leadership. We're up in the upper echelons of leadership now, so at least they'll fight on for a very long time. But their speed is down, their melee attack is down, but because there's only 12, their weapon strength is considerably higher. Smaller size companies perform better against other smaller size companies. Or very well against low-tier trash. Remember that units like this, where there's only 12 in the company, they have an effect that allows them to hit things in front of them, to hit things in a wide arc, to not be restricted to the singular narrow lanes of one-on-one combat, and instead bring down their foes that stand about them. Unbreakable. They do not ever suffer leadership loss. And they will never rout. So you will have to kill these. They will not run away, and nor will they die through loss of leadership. And they can destroy gates, which is pretty nice. They are armor sundering, which means they weaken the target's armor rather than do a flat damage, which is what armor piercing does. So armor piercing ignores a certain amount of armor. Armor sundering reduces the armor of anyone they attack, meaning anyone else that then hits that unit will now have a lower armor. So that's pretty nice. A very, very solid unit to support your Forsaken. Also helping you at this tier then are your first primary interesting ranged unit. Monstrous Missile Infantry, the Flamers of Tzeentch. The crab, five-headed lizard things of Tzeentch. Disgusting. Depravities. Comparing them with the Forsaken, again, let's do it the other way around. Forsaken have more health, more armor, basically more everything. Let's not go down the list. But the Flamer's primary role is in their insane missile strength. 338 Warp Flame, which means they give weakness to fire damage to anyone they attack, and they sunder the armor of anyone they attack, which is brilliant. They're armor piercing in their attack anyway, so they're really good against heavily armored units. Really, really good against heavily armored units. Now, they only have 10 shots, so be selective in how you use them. And their range is awful at only 90. So, and as we can see from the melee stats, by comparing them with the Forsaken, the Flamers are not combatants in the melee sense. Do not put them in fighting. Their health's 2,300. That's absolutely awful. They will die. They will die, die. And the Lord of Change sees all from above. He'll not welcome the death of his own. Do not let them die. Their charge bonus is awful. They might as well not even charge at the enemy. It's like a light dusting of a light barge that one apologizes for in the tube station. Nothing that you would ever do any real damage with. Don't get them in melee, but fantastic armor-piercing snipers, basically, but with a terrible range. Shotgun. Let's call them shotgun. Armor-piercing shotgunners. Now, we then come to the tier of units that are particularly very, very good. And again, this is a real mixed bag. But we'll start with the one that we can qualify the best and quantify the best. The War Pony Riders, Chaos Knights of Tzeentch. And again, this is Tzeentch's flavour of Chaos Knight. They just have blue on them. That's how you know they're there with Tzeentch, because Tzeentch likes blue and purple. Has the map not given that away? I really like blue and purple. Yes, Tzeentch, we know. Anywho, Chaos Knights of Tzeentch. 120 armor. That is outrageous. The first unit in your roster that actually has a shield and understands the importance of avoiding dying. Very, very, very useful. Leadership of 74. Again, a natural comparison for these is the Forsaken, because the Forsaken are the closest thing you've got to walking knights on the ground. The Chaos Knights have much better health. Their melee attack is up, melee defense is up. The charge, of course, is up because they're on a horse, but the weapon strength is worse. So watch out for that. The actual damage they do is not as good as the Forsaken. So be careful with that. But they are your standard, I'm going to run into that enemy and I'm going to trample him beneath my hooves cavalry unit. And as you will note from the roster, the only of your cavalry units, in fact, that isn't gifted with the power of flight, which has its advantages, being on a horse. Very, very sound unit, but nothing really that stands out. Again, they are anti-infantry, but they don't have any amazing, outrageous power like we saw with the Flamers, where they've got the Warp Flame and then their armor piercing. These guys are just good. You can then put a full stop after that word and move on, which is exactly what we're going to do. Supporting them are the Doom Knights of Tzeentch. These ones are a bit nuttier and a bit crazier and decided that seatbelts aren't a thing because they stand on a levitating flat platform and fly it into their enemies. Consider them just like a standard flying unit, really. Any flying cavalry. Compared to the Doom Knights, they have... not Doom Knights, the Chaos Knights. They have much less health, and they have less armor, but they still have outrageously good armor in comparison to generally most of the things you're going to come up against. Their weapon strength is much, much higher, but there are less of them. Watch out for that again. There are less of them. So they are on a similar sort of term to the Chaos Knights. Charge bonus of 52, which is higher than the Chaos Knights as well. An excellent, excellent flying late-game cavalry unit. Melee attack of 44 is very good. Defense of 36 isn't great, and is even lower than the Chaos Knights, which is a bit disappointing. But still, a unit that will do wonders for you, and your only other form of Chaos Knight. Then we come over to the elite ranged units, and we've got what the game calls a flying missile chariot. Which is interesting. Interesting that this one has to have two things pulling it along, when these guys just hover around on their discs, no trouble. But we won't start with the Burning Chariot, we will start with the Exalted Flamer of Tzeentch. Now, the Exalted Flamer, the first thing you'll note about him is that sadly he comes alone to the battlefield. All of his friends have decided to sit this one out. So the Flamers of Tzeentch, only one of them is exalted. But again, the HP is awful. The armor is awful. The leadership's not even that good. But the weapon strength is up 274. So they are going to do a shed load of damage. But remember, that is in melee. And you don't really want to get this thing into melee. But its melee attack is armor piercing. Similarly, I didn't mention that on the Flamers. Their melee attack is at least relatively good, and it is armor piercing. But just don't get them into melee. Just don't do it. The Exalted Flamer has 10 ammo again. He again has magical attacks, flaming attacks, warps, flame, and armor piercing. But you'll note that he does 1,100 damage per shot. And the normal Flamers do 338, but there is only one of him and there are 9 of them. And again, if you times it, it just doesn't work in that same way. He's a very, 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 very good missile monster. But just try to keep him out of melee because his health isn't very good at all. And Slayer type units will bring him down. Supporting him then, the Flying Missile Chariot. Now I've put this one over here because it's primarily a missile unit. Ammunition is 9. Range is 90, missile of 1.1k again. So it is in all forms, really, an Exalted Flamer riding a chariot. It's got more speed because it's on a chariot. It's got more armor because it's on a chariot. It's got more health because there's 2 little floating manta rays pulling it along. Its charge bonus is obviously higher for that as well. Weapon strength slightly higher. Melee defense, again, slightly higher. It is, as I've said, a mounted Exalted Flamer. So you get all the benefits of having an Exalted Flamer, but this one moves around. And again, the Exalted Flamer, like the Flamer, performs as an excellent sniping type unit. Send him in, pick your shots well, and you'll get some excellent damage with him. And as we fight a little mock battle after this, you'll see all of these people firing off their ranged attacks. You can see what they all do. Then we come, before we hit the heroes and the lords, the last thing you get is the I'm not quite Kairos, or my mum went to the store and I asked for a Kairos and this is what she came back with. It's a Lord of Change. He's a spellcaster, he gets barrier as well, and he causes terror. And you'll note he has a number of other little features down below that we again won't go into massive detail over, but he has a couple of spells. Blue Fire of Tzeentch, good against large combatants. and gives Warp Flame on contact, which is pretty nice. And Pink Fire of Tzeentch, expanding tier shape. So you've got an anti-infantry and an anti-singular, or an anti-mass and an anti-single target attack that he comes with. Comparing him, it's probably best if we did it with Kairos, to be honest, or rather the other way around. But again, let's take our good old standard Forsaken of Tzeentch and compare them with the Lord of Change. The Lord of Change has less overall health than them, but he's a single entity, so that much health for a single entity is much, much better. His armor is still pretty atrocious at 30, though, so watch out for armor-piercing attacks, because they'll just shred through him. Leadership of 70, reasonably good, but not amazing. But speed is good, melee attack is good, melee defense is good, and weapon strength is up at 315. But again, he's a single entity, so the weapon strength take with a pinch of salt. His charge bonus isn't very good for that, though. But again, he's a spellcaster, as I've already mentioned now twice, really showing the theme of spellcasting through the roster. Let us then compare him with Kairos, because they are very, very similar. Both of them, as you can see, they fly. Both of them are wizards. Kairos has a number of abilities that make him a good old battle beastie boy. I won't go, again, this isn't an overview of Kairos. This is just a general what can you expect from the roster. Kairos has 50 armor, which is okay, but not amazing. Watch out for that. His charge is abysmally bad because he is primarily a spellcaster. His weapon strength, again, is the same as the Lord of Change, so pretty good there. Melee defense of 20, even worse than the Lord of Change. Melee attacks worse than the Lord of Change. His speed is 90, which is the same. So the Lord of Change is a better melee combatant, but Kairos, with his plethora of spells and abilities, will be casting spells till the cows come home, and the cows rarely come home, so that option is always available to you. And lastly, then, your heroes. I can do, of course, deep dives into the lords, but if people request it. Next up, we have the Iridescent Horror. There's a metal version and there's a Tzeentch version, and they give different spells based on that. The Iridescent Horror, let's compare the little hero fellow with the Lord of Change once again. Now, obviously, he doesn't fly. He's a little smaller, but he does have a glowing wand thing, and I mean, you can't discount the glowing wand. But as you'll note, he is not a melee combatant by any stretch of the imagination, but that's because he is a spell-casting ranged unit that has flame attacks and magical attacks. 226 weapon strength, which is 89 less than a Lord of Change. Disappointing. Armor, again, nothing at all. Leadership's not even that great. But the melee attack and melee defense are passable, but you don't really want to be using him in melee. They're not even passable. I'm doing him way too much of a service. He is a ranged unit. 130 on the range, 281 missile attack, and 20 ammunition. And again, he does... I keep hovering over the cultist. He does magical attacks and flaming attacks. So he's good against ghosts, he's good against the undead, he's good against anything that doesn't like those things. Chuck him out the front ready. And then lastly, the cultist of Tzeentch. More health than an Iridescent Horror, but less armor, less leadership, less speed, less melee attack, less weapon strength, less charge bonus, and he doesn't have any ranged. The cultist of Tzeentch, not all that great, but he has a plethora of flame-based spells, so at least he's sort of your primary go-to for flame, whereas the Iridescent Horrors are metal or Tzeentch, as I've already mentioned. Cultist, not a great hero in terms of just... He's a spellcaster. Use him as you would any spellcaster, and by that I mean don't let him fight an enemy, don't let them shoot at him, and keep him at the back casting spells and you'll get on all right. Alrighty then. The Soul Grinder. Because we definitely didn't forget to cover the Little Grom Artillery in Kislev, and we definitely didn't have to actually come back and record this bit because we forgot to talk about the artillery again. No. Tzeentch provides. The Soul Grinder is the artillery for Tzeentch, and it is also fantastic in melee. So it is an artillery piece. It fires a wide area of effect. Not a huge area of effect, but it fires like 6 projectiles. It kind of javelin throws them. It's a bit peculiar. You'll see it in a moment. And it is very good against any grouped up units, as with any kind of artillery. It has a low fire arc, though. So it's not like mortar where it will go ridiculously high into the sky and then drop down. So it might give you some friendly fire, so watch out for that. It has armor-piercing attacks and it causes terror. But once it gets into battle, the best thing to compare it to is a Lord of Change, interestingly enough. Because the Lord of Change, as you will note by hovering over, the Soul Grinder has more health, more armor, and better weapon strength than the Lord of Change. Now, the other stats are worse, so its leadership is slightly worse. Speed, of course, you'd expect. It doesn't have wings. The melee attack is only 3 worse, and the melee defense is only 10 less, so it is a very, very good individual unit. One of the few artillery pieces in the game that will actually then fight and die well when the enemy gets close to it, which eventually they always inevitably do. And then to finish, we have just some of our units in action, and you can see the glory of Tzeentch as the colours of the blues and the pinks whirl into our enemies. Many of our military units will die in this. It is only just a brief little show off of what some of our units can look like in their attacks and things, in the carnage and the maelstrom that unfolds before you as the fury of Kislev is met by the changing ways of Tzeentch. And we're losing hard, as expected. Now, the Soul Grinder. Where is the Soul Grinder? There he is. I want to show you his attack because it looks very cool. So if you would, my little Soul Grinder man, throw your javelin at that giant bear over yonder. Give it all you have. Here you go. He lines it up, and then a few more go with it. Very much like the Mesmer in the upcoming Guild Wars 2. Niche reference. And that is Tzeentch. So do let me know what you have thought about this second episode. I hope you enjoyed Kislev as well. Let me know your thoughts on anything you would like to see different or you would like changed. And I would welcome any and all feedback you have for me. I hope greatly that you have enjoyed this. My greatest hope is that you might have actually learned something. But at the bare minimum, hopefully it's just been entertaining. And until the next one, Navaya Naden Pedimad Melonim, and farewell.